Attachment theory and the importance of early brain development. Did you know that infancy, specifically between the period of 0 to 3 years of age, is increasingly being recognised as a time of rapid and significant brain growth, enabling the development of core neurodevelopmental abilities underlying later psychological and emotional well-being? No, nor did I. If yes, then you'll be aware of the importance of the integration of findings from developmental and attachment theories and neurodevelopment, and how these theories have contributed to greater understanding of the significance of early relationships. Environmental influences infancy, particularly the quality of the caregiver-infant relationship, and emotional interactions within this framework have been identified to shape neurological, psychological, and social development, and have potential for long-term effects on psychological and emotional functioning. Now, this is not common knowledge to the average primary caregiver, and personally, I've never heard of neuroscience behind the attachment behaviour until recent years. Attachment theory is an integrative framework of human development, where development occurs in early relationships which provide security and comfort. The infant is dependent on the carer for stress and emotional regulation, and to modulate their overall level of neurophysiological stimulation. The impact of lack of early regulation and high levels of stress is potentially widespread and impacts the developing stress regulatory mechanisms as well as the development of attachment. Current studies suggest that stressful early environments contribute to the psychological dysregulation of an individual's stress regulation systems. I'm Kate Mason, and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today I'm talking to Megan Gallagher about attachment theory, not from the abuse perspective, but more from the lack of understanding and well-meaning caregivers who are unwittingly neglecting this crucial stage of development. Now, the culprits are phones and other technology, which are robbing us of human face-to-face interaction with our infants and the impact that they have on the infant's emotional development and attachment in their primary caregiving relationship. Megan is an extraordinary teacher and presenter. I've seen her in action. She's also a business owner of Ignite Your Spark, providing consultant and coaching services. She also co-hosts a teacher's podcast called Teachers Matters, where she and her co-host Karen Tui Boyce provide support and help to the teaching community worldwide. Her goal in life is to help people thrive so that our children, families, schools, workplaces and communities and the world will be happier and healthier. Hi Meg, how are you going?
Kia ora. Hello, I'm going great, Kate. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Now, can you just tell our listeners where you are? What country are you in?
I am in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And so that's why I say kia ora, because that's our that's a Māori greeting, and it means may you be well. Excellent. Which is a lovely way to greet another person, I think.
It is a very nice way, rather than how are you and no one really cares.
Exactly.
Yeah, so no, that's a great way to meet. So Meg, what time is it for you? You're a couple of hours ahead of me, aren't you?
Yes. So right now it's 11:30 in the morning here, and it's 9:30 at your place.
Yeah, and it's beautiful weather for you or not?
We're heading towards winter, so it's a bit chilly outside, but actually it's a beautiful sunny day, so I'm going to hold on to that.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, we've got a bit of one of those as well. A bit cold, but lovely. So listen, what I want to know is I want to know about you. Where did you start your love of teaching and helping other people? When did it all begin?
I think it's been part of who I am right from the day dot, really, to be honest. And I certainly, with the love of teaching, I wanted to be a teacher from the time I first started school. And I remember my younger sister, poor kid, she was my first class. So I'd have her and her toys, and they'd be lined up, and I'd make big books out of old wallpaper that my father had left over from the house. And I'd tell stories. She'd be writing. She'd have to do her maths. She was a very obedient student, which was quite helpful.
And did she learn?
Well, I believe she did.
And is she still talking to you today?
Oh, sometimes.
Yes, yeah, beautiful. So from teaching at home, the homeschooling that you did with your sister, where did it go on in, what did you do after you finished school, and what kind of study did you do?
Yeah, well, see, the thing for me, I was really lucky to find that passion right from early on. So generally speaking, apart from a small dalliance I had with the idea of being a psychologist, I just was driven to be a teacher. And so everything took me that way. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get accepted to Teachers College my first application.
Really?
Yeah, and I understand why. I interviewed terribly, absolutely awfully. It was horrendous. But it actually ended up being a really, really good thing for me because I was so passionate about being a teacher, I decided not to go to university and do just any old course. And instead what I did was I went and worked on some of the areas that weren't strengths at the time. I did a modelling course because I was so incredibly shy in some ways. And that was great for my self-confidence. I ended up working for what was called IHC at the time, which was the Intellectually Handicapped Children's Society. So this was a long time ago. And in working with the guys that we worked with there, I learned so much about humility and humanity and kindness and acceptance and respect. And all of that has actually been a great foundation for me to then, when I then got into Teachers College, that I could build my teaching practice from. So I was actually incredibly blessed not to get in for a start off. You know, it was a bit of a kick in the guts in the first spot, but I learned so much and it was amazing.
What a wonderful background to come in with, because that is so important in teaching, and particularly now, isn't it, in the sense of understanding people and the things that are happening today. So we're going to talk about a bit of neuroscience today. Now, I have to confess that I am not a neuroscience nerd at all and have never really thought about it. It's just not on my radar. So I want you to, well, what do you love the most about neuroscience?
Oh, it's for me, and like I'm not an expert at all. I'm an avid fan. And I pick up the little bits that I can understand. And the wonderful thing is that the more that you pick up, the more you realise there are questions. So it fuels my curiosity. And I'm intensely fascinated by people and how they work and why we do the things we do. And so that's that was where I came into it from. And I know that the more I learn, the more empathetic I become.
Very true.
Because I have a greater level of understanding that, you know, there's a whole lot of ways of being a person, being human, and of thinking and feeling. And so, it's been great.
Yeah, and not just our own ways. And it is. I'm learning so much as I do my podcast from so many people. There is so much more to humanity than we really know about. So when I started talking to you, we started talking about attachment theory, and we were talking around young mothers today and the way that they attach to their infants. But let's just go into, can you tell us what is attachment theory?
So attachment theory really outlines the bonds that are created in early life with primary caregivers and how that sets the foundation for relationships as we grow older and as we interact with the wider world.
And how important are they? Like, what's the importance?
Oh, massively important. They really are. Yeah.
So where do they begin? So how does it all start with the mother or the parent or the caregiver that's the primary caregiver of the child? How does it all start? Because I've seen some videos watching the child having to be eye contact and looking at the person who's caring for them and them speaking to them. So where does that all begin?
So it starts right from day dot, really. And I think a really important caveat to have at the start of this, when we start talking about this, is it's not all or nothing. And none of us are perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which we know.
Parenting is not a perfect science because we're dealing with people and we're all unique and individual and different. So there's not one way to do this perfectly.
Yep.
And it's about probably looking at, I suppose it's on a balance. And that the balance goes more towards attachment than not. But there's going to be some days when we're busy and we can't attend to our child's needs as soon as they would like them to be attended to, and that's actually normal, and that's good for them too. But in infancy, basically, we're born, And because of how we've evolved, we are born as incredibly vulnerable individuals. In fact, we can't survive without other people. And so we have, we're born with this innate way to connect with people, to bond with them. And so, and we, we need it for survival. And the connection between the parent and the child's really important because ultimately the parent is a source of food.
Yes,
for the child.
Initially, especially.
Yeah, initially. Even, regardless of whether we're breastfeeding or not, and let's not get into that debate, but we still supply the food. The baby can't go and get its own food. It can't clean itself. It can't address any of its own needs in those first few months. And so, indeed, in the first few years, it's completely really reliant on these caring adults. And so we're designed to grow in this social situation because that is where safety, security, and survival is. And so babies will engender that. That's why they cry. They communicate.
Yes.
To express their needs with an expectation that need will be addressed and met. And that's where the attachment happens. Is when a baby connects in some way, they might make little sounds, and when we make the sounds back, then there becomes this engagement and this interchange or interplay. That's again attachment, because we're teaching them that, if you seek out communication, you will get communication back, and then that makes you feel safe and supported. Those sorts of things.
And the same with eye contact as well. We were discussing eye contact, and even if you're breastfeeding or even bottle feeding your child, looking at your child while they gaze up at you is a really important part of the attachment as well. So
absolutely,
what happens if the child doesn't receive this positive attachment when they're young? What happens to that child as they get older? Because we've found, from the attachment theory is that no matter whether you're treated well or not, you usually have a very strong attachment to that person, your primary caregiver, during that time.
Yeah, so with the attachment theory, what they're saying is there's either secure attachment or insecure attachment. Now, secure attachment is where there is a warmth, there is a meeting of the child's needs. It's socialised. They feel safe to express their feelings. So it's a safe, secure environment for them to grow and flourish in. In insecure attachment, the parent may be disconnected. So the child's physical needs are attended to, but their emotional needs aren't necessarily, or not very well. There may be inconsistencies, like strong inconsistencies, where one day everything is fine and roses and then snap, it all change. So the child doesn't know whether their needs are going to get met today or not. And so that leads to an insecure attachment. And then there's finally a really disorganised style, which is really around, and this is, abusive parenting. And so any of the insecure attachment styles will impact the young person potentially, and this is for some, not everybody, because again, we're all unique, but potentially impacts on their ability to form close relationships, to have that emotional intelligence, to have empathy for others. In some cases, they over-empathise with others and don't have a sense of self. In other cases, they struggle to empathise with others because they've been taught to close themselves off because that's safer than exposing themselves and then being hurt or and you get hurt by your needs not being met. And then that impacts on their learning, that impacts on their relationships, it can impact on their ability to get jobs done. It can have some positive impacts in terms of they can become very independent, which can be a positive and a negative, because we don't want to be too clingy. And secure attachment doesn't bring that clinginess, because what it says when you have a real and genuine need, somebody will probably come and help you. In most cases, they will. And what happens is through meeting their needs, we teach them, we use the word co-regulation. So through co-regulating, we teach them that their needs can be met. So then eventually they self-regulate. So they don't need us to do it for them because they've been shown how. an insecure attachment, often the kids aren't shown how to meet their needs in a way that is warm and affirming and accepting and positive for the child's development.
Many parents ask me, how do I talk to my kids? Do you struggle with this? How well do you really know your child? Knowledgeable communication is the key to successful bonding with your child. This is something I can help you with. I meet with parents all the time around this. So let's chat. Contact me at thepersonalitycoach.com.au. And self-regulation these days is really, really important, especially in such a busy world that we all live in, including our kids. So today, rather than looking at the emotional or non-emotional attachment, with young children coming through school at the moment, because you're in contact with those children, what kind of behaviours do you see at the moment that might relate possibly to this kind of attachment not happening, not deliberately happening, but not happening for children?
So a lot of social, don't like this word, but it seems to be social inadequacies or deficiencies. So students or children who really struggle to be able to share turns. We see a lot of inappropriate ways of managing conflict.
Yes.
You know, if I'm not getting my way, I lash out, I hit you, I hurt you, because that's going to get what I want. But we know that that's actually not a really socially very acceptable way of achieving your needs being met. We see them really struggling with getting criticism or taking feedback, finding it hard to attend to tasks, finding it hard to manage themselves with, I've got to do this, but I want to do that. And so we see more meltdowns. And all of that is really disruptive. It's disruptive for the child because it creates a barrier to them being able to learn in school. It's disruptive to other children around them. It makes the teacher's job much harder, obviously. You can't teach reading, writing and maths if we're not in an emotionally, mentally healthy space to learn. And so everybody's impacted in that small, and a classroom or a school is just it's a microcosm of society, right?
Yes.
So we're actually creating the future society through what we're learning and what we're doing in schools. So, it impacts everybody and it impacts the future.
And massively so for even more inexperienced teachers, because how long would you have been teaching for?
A long time.
Long time.
Well, I'm over 50. If we take out my early career with my sister, I've been in the education system for 30 years.
Right. And so have things changed? Like, was it always like this? It's changed hugely, hasn't it? Yeah. So what we're going to talk about today is just one of the aspects that might have helped create this change or, might be part of this change is possibly the use of mobile phones and the media that has come in for mothers and parents in particular when they're parenting their child. I sit there nowadays and I watch people pushing their pushers and they're on the phone to their friend. They're not looking at their child, chatting to their child as we used to do when we used to push the pusher. There was nothing else to do, I guess. But we used to face to face talk to them. They didn't understand, but that was okay because no one else was listening. And we'd be in the back seat. They'd be in the capsule or whatever it is in the back seat of the car and chat to them too, because there was no phone inside the car to chat to a friend on. There was also when you're breastfeeding or you're feeding your child, you couldn't be on Facebook or TikTok or anything like that watching a different show. You looked at your child. You had eye contact. You smiled, you stroked them, you were totally in contact with your child. And I look around today and I go, there is so much less of that happening for children. And I also have a friend in the early learning space as well. And she's saying that they come to school with problems with their speech because no one talks to them as much anymore. And the behavioural problems you're mentioning because no one gives them direction on how to behave or self-regulate, because often they're handed an iPad or they're handed a phone when that behaviour starts. So where do you see that?
Yeah, so I think it's probably become worse in the last 3 years because, if you think about COVID, we were told to self-isolate and social distance. And so, like 3 years ago, I might have had a Zoom meeting maybe once a month if I was lucky or unlucky, as the case may be. This morning I've already had one before talking to you. And I've got another one this afternoon. So that social distancing and that using of digital devices to communicate and connect is so much more ubiquitous now. And I think that's part of the context that we're living in. And so managing that's going to be really important going forward. One of the things that I notice with that digital distraction is that we miss the cues from our kids. And I know that some people talk about this as being attention-seeking behaviours. No, the good old mum, 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 mum. Pester power is another turn of phrase that's been used for that. But if we switch our minds around and reframe that as not attention-seeking but connection-seeking, then when we're on our phones and our kids are going mum, 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 and we hand them a device or we fob them off, we're actually missing an opportunity to enhance that sense of attachment and that security for our kids. And so it's about, I think, being aware of how we're using our devices and when that's becoming a barrier. Because like you say, if I'm not gazing at my child when I'm feeding them, whether it be bottle or breast or with a spoon, they're missing out on some of those really important facial cues that they're going to be putting into their little memory banks that they'll be able to use going forward when they're relating to other people. If we don't talk to them, their literacy is hampered hugely. How many children, in my day, we used nursery rhymes a lot, and I could sit in the classroom and I'd go, Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, and all the kids could do the next line. Now, that's not the case. A lot of children don't know the next line, or they don't know the rhyme. In a story like a Dr. Seuss story, where you can, although sometimes Dr. Seuss's words are a little bit weird, but where you can read the line and then read the next line and expect that they'll be able to predict the word, they've got no idea because they have they don't have the strong basis for language because they just haven't been spoken it enough. They haven't heard enough stories. The cuddle up time on the couch for me with my son was one of our favourite times, and we would have multiple times of that during the day. And so now he's 12. We still have that time. And it's now a place that he goes to that is safe for him, so he can regulate himself with that now. So that's that being able to self-soothe because he's had that modelled to him.
So really, if you're listening, and even if you're a grandparent, even if you're anyone like that, those things are still taking away from our connection with kids today in every form. So if there is a one thing or a couple of things that you could say, what would you say to people thinking about the connections and the physical and emotional connections that are really some of the most important things that you think we should be doing with infants and really young kiddies to get them started on that journey of self-regulation, connection, being able to talk to people and get along with people?
The first one is that you can't overlove a child. You can't
That's
spoil a baby.
Yeah. No.
And it doesn't mean that we are on tenterhooks to address every single urgent need, and not every need is urgent either. But it's about that being aware and cueing into our own child's cues. And even for neurodiverse students or children, that attachment, it might look different, but it's still really important to have secure attachment. It might be harder in some ways to be able to regulate and register what's going on, but you are their best support. And there's so many services out there to support parents now, which I think is fabulous. And the other thing, so yeah, you can't spoil a child or spoil a baby. And the other thing is, when you're using your devices, get really clear on what the purpose is. So ask yourself, am I, and this comes from, can't remember his name right now. It'll probably come to me after we finish this conversation. I'm so
That's
sorry.
That's all right. We can pop it at the bottom of the show notes if we need to. If it's important, go for it.
Justin Colson, sorry.
Oh, yes, Justin. Yep.
Justin talks about with device use with kids, and I use this with myself as well. Is it are you creating, consuming, connecting, and I also put in collaborating. So am I working with somebody here? Am I connecting? So am I reaching out and getting a social connection? Am I creating something new here? Or am I just mindlessly doom scrolling and consuming or playing mindless games to just zone out of the world? Because when you start asking yourself why you're doing what you're doing, you become more aware. When you become more aware, then you can actually say, is this more important than attending to the needs of my child? Is this more important than connection and attachment with my child? And sometimes it will be, because, it might be an important work deadline that you need to meet. So you need to be able to explain to your child at the moment, this is what I'm doing. Obviously, you can't have that conversation with a baby. But, with younger children, actually being able to say, Mummy's doing this right now, and I will be with you soon. Can you wait? And teaching them to wait. For me, I was working when my son was working in a similar situation as this. When he was a toddler, and I taught him actually to be able to touch my wrist when I was on a phone call to tell me that he needed me. And then I would tap his wee hand and give it a wee rub. Mm-hmm. I'd give him a look and a nod so he knew that I knew that he needed me. And then I'd check that he was okay. He would tell me he was okay, and I'd let him know that I was coming to him. So he knew that his need was going to be met. It's not met immediately, but I was going to check in with him soon. I do the same thing in classrooms with students.
That's a great way. That's a great thing.
Yeah, those little things. And, can I have a third one? I just want to go back to where I started. Please don't think that you need to be perfect.
Yes.
This isn't a perfect science. If you sit and doom scroll on your phone one day because you've had it and you're tired, nobody will, nobody will die from that, generally speaking. It's okay. So don't beat yourself up. This isn't about beating yourself up. And we can improve attachment, even if things have been really hard earlier on. We can rewire the brain. We can actually, through just attending now and meeting needs now, we can make a difference to our kids now.
That is great news, because sometimes as a parent you think, oh my goodness, I've done that and it's never going to be right and I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. So knowing that you can actually change and rewire that brain and do something different, and it is about doing something different. And it's just about being aware as well, because I don't think a lot of young people know about brain. They don't know about attachment theory. They don't that's just another subject. But it's just not really. It's just not really being aware of what you're actually doing. I think a lot of them aren't aware that is what's happening for their child. So if you're listening, tell the person that that might be doing that, and tell them that it doesn't matter, they're not perfect. They're doing an amazing job anyway, because it's a tough gig parenting. Meg, thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So all is not lost. What can a primary caregiver start to change to rectify this matter? Put away your phone. Give your child eye contact. Talk to your child. Listen to them. Don't talk at them. Reinforce positive behaviours and emotions. And most of all, enjoy them. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoy this episode, we'd love it if you would leave a rating and a review. That would help others learn about the podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who Is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies. and we'll see you next time.